Hi, everybody. Welcome to the GEICO 15-Minute Moto Show. I'm your host, Ralph Sheheen. We're here today at Circuit of the Americas, and I'm joined by a great friend, 1993 500cc Grand Prix World Champion, Kevin Schwantz. Kevin, how you doing?
All's well, Ralph. How are you?
I'm good, buddy. Back here at the racetrack. This is your home track these days since Circuit of the Americas was built here in Austin. You don't live too far from here. You've lived here quite a while. How do you feel about seeing bikes on the road course here?
You know, it's always great when two wheels are here, whether it's a track day that's going on or whether it's Moto America or Moto GP. Having motorcycles in town, having all the athletes here, going into some of my favorite restaurants, just being part of what Austin is all about is really special. So I'd love to see either Moto America or Moto GP both back real soon.
Well, you were a real ambassador for the track and helping to get MotoGP here originally. How do you feel about where it is with MotoGP? Obviously, we've had some challenges with COVID in the last 2 years, but in general, MotoGP and COVID as a partnership, or COTA, yeah.
COTA. You know, I think it's been a good relationship so far. I think COVID has maybe tested that relationship just a little bit. You know, the Dorna guys still want the same amount of money when you can't sell as many tickets, you can't bring as many people in. It's a challenge for everybody, but I think the way to ensure that we still have that great representation from two wheels is just to bring the championship back. Whether Dorna needs to work on a pandemic level and let's cut things back a little bit, and Bobby needs to talk to him a little bit and try and negotiate more. I don't know exactly what's going on between them two, but it's it's such a great thing when MotoGP's in town. I mean, this city just lights up with people that want to come out and see motorcycles. It's one of the few sports left out there where there's really good practice, really good qualifying, and then there's actual passing in the race. I mean, we just saw the first race in Qatar for MotoGP this year. What a great MotoGP race.
Yeah, how about the state of motorcycle road racing as a whole in the United States? Do you feel like it's pretty strong, or do we have some need for growth?
You know, I think Wayne Rainey and Chuck Axlin are doing the best that they can. I mean, we don't really have any factory teams to speak of here. And back in the day when I raced, if Suzuki hadn't been here as a factory and I didn't ride for the factory, me getting to Europe trying to do it out of my own wherewithal would have been next to impossible. So what we really need is we need bike sales to skyrocket again. We need manufacturers to get back involved in the American Championship. And then that pathway to Europe and to the World Championships is a much easier path for the young kids here. As far as the riders go in America, I mean, we've got Joe Roberts and Cameron Beaubier over there right now. Cam in his first Moto2 Grand Prix came from 21st to 11th, I think, past 10 guys. Joe Roberts finished 6th. So we've got a strong contingent, and I think the level of talent we have in America as far as riders go in the garages behind us is as good as it's ever been, but we don't have that easy pathway for them to get into to superbikes or Grand Prix racing.
Yeah. When you travel the world and you talk to team owners or manufacturers and so forth, do they kind of chuckle when you talk about riders from America these days, or do they hope for the possibility of the next Kevin Schwantz?
No, and I think they're all looking for, it's either the next Spies or the next Hayden, or we go back far enough that some of them remember me, the next Kevin Schwantz. But, and like I said, I think people still have an eye on this championship, especially if you're a team manager or a team owner, or you're one of the manufacturers that's involved in Grand Prix racing. Maybe you find a young talent over here that you get for a couple of years for a song and a prayer instead of having to write him a big fat check. But, I think our kids are as fast as they've ever been, that's for sure.
Some of the folks watching this, obviously, if you're watching this, you're a big motorcycle fan, but maybe you don't necessarily know the difference between a 500 Grand Prix bike, which you rode, and what the current MotoGP bikes are of today. If you had to describe to somebody what the experience was like of riding one of those 500s, what was it like?
I mean, a 500, when it was set up right, it was really, really enjoyable to ride. But of the
It sure didn't look it.
But of the 110 Grand Prix that I rode, the number of ones that I rode that were correctly set up, I can count on one hand and have a couple fingers left. So it was always a battle. You either get it right in the beginning or you'd have it set up at the end. Sometimes it was jetted correctly and the power band was almost 3,000 RPM wide. If it wasn't jetted correctly, that could be as low as 2,000, 2,200, maybe 2,300 RPM.
Wow.
And instant. I mean, just a light switch. So you really had to make sure you had your cornering finished and knew that you had a little bit of wheel spin coming probably and needed to be able to make that next shift while the wheel was spinning. So always a real challenge, but so rewarding when you could get on one and get comfortable on it. It was a lot of fun most of the time.
Yeah, what was the one track that really suited the 500 the best, where you went, man, this bike, when it's right on this track, is the epitome of motorcycle road racing?
You know, I think Donington Park. I first raced there in '88 and didn't make the first lap, and then I won the Grand Prix then 4 of the next 5 years or 4 of the next 6 years. But it's one of those tracks that, you get it all the way up into top gear coming back down the back straightaway, but it's a sequence of corners going downhill, turning back up, big, fast, flowing corners, and a couple of little silly, slower corners at the end, which always helped us. The bike was always really good on the brakes, so if we were struggling with setup early on with a full load of fuel, later in the race, the bike got better. We got a little better on the brakes. I think Donington Park was one of those. Another one that I really liked a lot was Suzuka. Some really long back straightaways up the hill, long back straightaways. You had to have a lot of top speed, but there was such a sequence of corners from turn 2 to turn 10, and then on back straightaway, back into the hairpin, into the spoon curve, and around some really fast 4th and 5th gear corners. It challenged the best of them.
We were talking about this last night at dinner about the 500 and how it could inject a lot of fear even into the best riders of the world. But when you step away from that, do you miss that fear now that it's not a part of your daily routine?
I don't think it's the fear of riding it that used to motivate me. It was the thought of being able to tame it. I think once you become afraid of it, then you've reached here, and you probably ought to start looking at stepping aside. Every time I got on a bike, anytime it was a race, anytime there was a green light and a checkered flag at the end, my mental attitude at the start of the race was whether I was front row pole position or third row, which we used to call the barbecue row because we may as well have stayed home and had a barbecue. Whether I was third or first row, I always felt like I was going to find something. I was going to figure something out in that race that was going to put me near the front. And I think if you don't have that mentality and you're just there, well, we'll get good points today. We'll finish 4th, 5th, 6th, wherever we can get. It's a different story. For me, as my career progressed, after Wayne got hurt in '93 when I won the championship, my focus was just all over the place. I tried to come back and race in '94 and made a pretty good effort of it, won a couple of Grand Prix in '94, but was never at that same level that I was before Wayne's accident. So, I tried again in '95 and made 3 races before I decided that one of my favorite racetracks I just spoke of, Suzuka. I'm riding around in the rain, and it used to be rain at Suzuka, and it was like, I was going to be one of the guys at the front. You probably need to figure out how to beat me. And I'm riding around in 5th or 6th place, I forget. And Loris Caparossi passes me, and he kind of shoves his way past, and when he does, he reaches up and kind of acknowledges that maybe I did you a little bit wrong, and when he does, cracks the throttle too quick, and the thing high sides him off in the rain. So, if you're ever out there and you're not 100% focused thinking you can win, there's a little bit of fear in there, and that's what'll hurt you.
We all were enthralled watching you and Wayne and Eddie and Gardner and Mick battling those years, especially you and Wayne. And I know that's almost a lifelong rivalry, but now you can smile about it because the checkered flags are put aside. Do you reflect on it now and realize how awesome that really was?
Absolutely, because so many kids who are just getting into racing today. My dad makes me sit down and watch the videos of you guys racing, and having kids from 10 years old to grown-ups that are my age or even older, saying, you were one of the best out there in that era that you raced in. There was so many guys every weekend that could win. There was 3 factory Hondas. There was typically 4 factory Yamahas. There was a couple Suzukis. Then there was some Kajivas. I mean, there was 10 or 12 factory bikes out there, and it was it was absolutely a fight. Absolutely every lap, practice, qualifying, racing. it was a battle. As soon as the shield goes down, you have no friends.
Yeah.
And as soon as the helmet comes off, you might see Rainey and I at the bar having a beer Sunday night. So it's a sport that used to really separate us during the week and draw us back together after Sunday.
Because you survived?
Because we all, and I think that's probably a big part of it, Hey, we had a great race. We put on a good show, and, man, we're here to talk about it. So it's something that you don't see as near the camaraderie in Grand Prix racing now. It's gotten a little more hectic. They have a little bit busier media schedule than maybe we had. But, the riders are trucks to bikes, back to trucks, back to their RV. And they never socialize, never see each other. It's see each other when you're sitting on the grid. I'm not even sure they do then, because I don't think.
Yeah.
I used to. One of my favorite things to do, because Wayne was always so serious. He'd be sitting on his bike waiting for the start. We'd gone out and done our sighting lap, and be sitting on the grid. I'd get off my, hey man, ready to go race? Get away from me, man! Get out of here! I used to always try and play as many mind games with him as I could. Unfortunately, he beat me a lot more than I beat him.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that Kevin Schwantz wouldn't be Kevin Schwantz without Wayne Rainey, and Wayne Rainey wouldn't be Wayne without Kevin, because you two pushed each other so hard?
I can answer that from my perspective, and absolutely. I think my career, what happened on the weekend didn't matter if he was in front of me. My weekend was a disaster. If he was behind me, and maybe I didn't win, but he was still behind me, my weekend was a success. Everything that I did on track, I based off of whether Wayne was in front or behind me. So, he motivated me. I think we sat down and did a Q&A here a couple of years ago for MotoGP. And I think we both kind of agreed that, Wayne says, I probably still would have been me, but, maybe not you, Kev.
Well, as you look back on it, is there one moment where you say that was the greatest battle the two of us had together?
I think everybody looks back at 91 in Hockenheim when he and I were going at it tooth and nail. The Honda had chunked a tire and Mick wasn't there. He drafts me coming out of the last chicane going into the stadium, and I move inside and outbrake him a little bit. Bike's all snapping sideways and back and forth. You watch that video, and coming out of the last right-hander before you come down to the last chicane, it's my bike's fourth gear, and it's to the stop sideways. It's one of those races where 91 was the year we were all on Dunlops. So Wayne and I both had probably about the same amount of grip left. He outsmarted me a little bit coming out of the last chicane, but I got the better of him on the brakes. And it's funny because I've heard somebody ask him, what was the worst part of your career? He goes, well, it was between Kevin winning his first Grand Prix and then winning his second Grand Prix before he finally got to Donington and won the Grand Prix in '88. He was like, I can't believe it. This guy, I'm supposed to have the measure of this guy, and he's already won 2 Grand Prix. So, it's stuff that we sit around and talk about, and there could probably be a couple of good books written about it, I'm sure.
Yeah, those bikes could also be pretty nasty when things went wrong. Tell one of the stories, because they're just fantastic, of the long slide at 170.
I was 2 different times in Australia that I hit the ground at 170 plus, and one was at Phillip Island in 1990 maybe. Yeah, 89. I was there. I qualified on pole. I crashed the first lap. Looked over my shoulder coming out of the hill at the bottom. MG, I think it is, after Lukey. Looked over my shoulder, out of the seat, over the handlebars, end of race. And the next year, starting the last lap, I'm second. Wayne Gardner's 10 bikes in front of me in first, and I'm like, he got to win last year because I made a stupid mistake.
Yeah.
I'm going to get him. And I drive it off in the first turn. Oh, I'm a little deeper than I need to be. I got to get off the front, but I need to slow down. Went to cover the rear brake, locked up the rear brake, threw me onto the ground. And both times spinning and sliding and spinning and sliding. And thank goodness, nothing out there to hit. I slid straight up the drag strip at Eastern Creek. I slid straight down and off the track into the grass at Phillip Island. And, they're both times when you hit the ground, you're like, oh, am I ever going to stop sliding?
Yeah.
And, it's the one at Eastern Creek was a mechanical. broken the engine in for 5 laps in Sunday morning warm-up, down the front straightaway wide open, I think starting the 6th lap or something like that. Shut the throttle and tried a little bit different technique, maybe not closing the throttle completely. And when I did and backshift it, it locked up in seat and threw me over the bars. And at that point, you're just along for a ride. Luckily, did a perfect flip, landed feet first, kind of flat on my back, sliding up the track, trying to keep my feet in front of me to stop getting sideways and then to start tumble. Managed to be lucky enough to do it, and I was convinced that was the last time I'd ever race a Grand Prix bike. I got off, walked over to the wall, sat down, and the Australian fans all started cheering. So I was like, I guess I got to race this afternoon.
Gotta go again.
Ran back across the track, got on the spare bike, ended up 4th in morning warm-up, and I think finished 4th on the race. But it was they're both quite memorable. One other time at Brainerd, just into the first turn, front tire folded over and slid forever and ever and ever and ever in the grass. And once again, knock on wood, was okay. I got to go back and race a different bike in the heat race later that day.
Right. Well, listen, appreciate you stopping by. For those of you that did not get a chance to see the 500 era, trust me when I tell you it was probably the greatest era of Grand Prix racing. Thank you, Kevin Schwantz, for coming by. I'm Ralph Sheheen. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the GEICO 15-Minute Moto Show. Just a reminder that a new episode of the GEICO 15-Minute Moto Show drops every Friday. Watch it for free on speedsport.tv or subscribe to the audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.